Your primary residence is one of the largest assets that you own and biggest contributors to your net worth. We are getting a ton of questions from people about what's going on in the housing market. How should we think about it? Rates are up, rates are down, inventory's up, inventory's down. What is our perspective as financial planners on the impact to your net worth and how should you approach the real estate market? So let's hop in. So I don't know how many houses are actually bought via cash, but I would be willing to make the argument that most houses are financed. And as such, the cash flow or the ability for the buyer to pay on a monthly note is what is going to dictate a lot of the demand in the market. And so generally what you see is this, a young couple, hey, our maximum budget is $2,500 a month. They talk to a realtor, they get pre-qualified by a lender, and then they diligently start looking at Zillow every single night on the couch and sending each other listings back and forth until they find a couple that they want to go see. All right, so you have it narrowed down to two houses in this absolutely hypothetical educational purposes only video. House 1 was built in 2004. It's 20 years old, but it's in great shape, let's say. It's 2,500 square feet, and they're asking $300,000. House 2 is a new build house. Kind of threw it in the mix. Just, it's new. Everybody likes new. See what that's about. Slightly bigger, a little more expensive. This is kind of where I'm seeing the market in a very interesting place right now, and this is where interest rates are really manifesting kind of I don't want to say an oddity, but certainly something that I want to just point out to people as they are looking at this process. So in our very hypothetical situation, we're going to assume that the buyers, that young couple in the last slide, are looking at a 5% conventional loan option. That just simply means they put down 5%. And the rest of the loan is financed. There's other costs and stuff, but this is simplified for the purpose of just understanding the basic concepts here. So for our purposes, 5% conventional means you put down 5% down payment, you finance the rest of it. So house 1, 20-year-old house, that would mean you put down roughly $15,000 down payment. Your loan is the difference, $285,000. Now this is where it gets a little tricky. Interest rates are higher. They're higher than they've been especially if this is your first house or you're under 35, maybe even under 40. I mean, interest rates haven't been this high much in your adult lifetime. So that feels real high, almost prohibitively so. We hear all the time, like, God, we want to buy a house, but rates are just too high right now. Well, that's, let's say that's where they are. Again, I don't know exactly where they are at this moment. And depending on when you're watching this video, rates probably have changed. So we're just going to assume 6.5%. That puts an all-in payment, principal, interest, taxes, PMI, which is private mortgage insurance, and then regular insurance around that target payment, around $2,500. That's house 1. House 2, again, it's a little more expensive, so your down payment against 5% of that is a little more. But this is where it gets spicy, if you will. The builder is saying, man, we know that you don't like the interest rate so high. It's so high. So this is what we'll do. We will buy down your rate to 5%, which is a little more comfortable level. And people think, okay, that's interesting. So interest rate 5%, that brings the payment of that $350,000 house into the same range of the $300,000 house just by the difference of the interest rate. Let's expand on what's happening with house 2 in the new build. So the way that your rate goes from 6.5% to 5% in this hypothetical is that the builder would spend somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000 in this example to buy the rate down. It's actual cash money to go buy the rate from 6.5% to 5%. That adjusts the payment for you. And essentially, they're just saying, we'll meet you at your monthly payment amount that you're comfortable with. Now, where it gets a little tricky and what the main concept that needs to be understood in how this is working is fast forward 2 years. And nobody knows where rates are going with certainty, but let's just, for our purposes, assume that rates are going to fall. Let's just, again, nobody knows that, but we're just going to assume it. So let's say it is February of 2026 and rates have fallen to a par rate of around 5, just meaning that they are naturally at about 5%. Of course, as the homeowner, there's no point to refinance. You already have a 5% rate. The rates are 5%. What's the point in refinancing? But where it gets tricky is that the value of your house has probably not changed because a new buyer, if you did put your house on the market, a new buyer would come in and they would buy your house at 5%, probably in a similar situation the way you bought. The difference is nobody's paying points, but the payment is about the same. And as I said earlier, the value of assets is very much dictated based on the cash flow and the ability for the buyer to make the payment. So in all likelihood, you probably wouldn't see a huge increase in the value of the house over that couple years in this case. Let's hop back over to house one. So again, 20-year-old house. Let's say they're very comparable. Like you're on the fence, you would buy either one. The difference here is that there's not really a way to buy down. I mean, the seller of that house is their only lever to pull is to cut the price of their house. They're not gonna put down $10,000 to $20,000 of the sale price of the house to help you buy down the rate. So their only real recourse is to discount the value, the asking price of the house. So like, let's say you bought this house, right? And you paid 6.5% interest for the last 2 years, but rates have fallen. They've fallen to 5%. Guess what? The value of your house, again, as a measure of the buyer's ability to make a payment, has probably increased to $350,000. Because again, it's just the concept here. I keep saying this, but the concept of an asset is its ability to create demand. The more demand, the higher the price. And that demand comes from a buyer pool that is actually able to afford it. So as rates decrease, more buyers enter the pool. That drives up price potentially. And so having the rates fall is going to have a positive impact, most likely, to the value of your house. So you buying option one would likely result in a falling interest rate environment of you making a price return on the value of that house in time. And then, by the way, let's say this is what happened. Let's say this is potentially what's happened. Rates have fallen. It's 2 years in. You could refinance at that point, and your $280,000 loan, because you've made 2 years of payments, so it's going from $285,000 to $280,000, let's say the house has increased to $350,000. Now you have 20% equity. Your PMI falls off. You're able to refinance at a lower rate, and your payment is now $2,100, and you have $70,000 worth of equity. So we kind of shot through that example pretty quickly, but the question and the goal at the onset of a financial transaction like buying a house shouldn't be, hey, we have $2,500 a month to spend on a house. It should be, hey, we want to be in a good financial position. And in an extension of that, we think we can afford probably $2,500 a month in payment. But what does that look like today? And potentially, maybe even more importantly, what does that look like tomorrow? So that is the right question to start with. The takeaways, again, are just very much tied into what are you trying to do. I'm not, if you want new construction, you want new construction. If you want an older house, you want an older house. You have to decide where you want to live, and that's something that just a financial decision can't tell you. But if you are considering the impact to your net worth and how that plays in and ties with your financial plan, just know that buying down the rate is probably going to result in you having to likely buy a more expensive house from a purchase price perspective, whereas taking the higher rate likely will result in the compromise of the seller to have to knock down that price to meet your payment point, your monthly payment point. And then if and when rates do fall, you likely will see a price return. And this also speaks to, by the way, we hear all the time, hey, we want to buy a house, but we're waiting for rates to fall. Well, guess what will happen to the price of houses if and when rates do fall? You likely will see them increase. So these are just a couple things to think about. Every situation is different. You need to consult a qualified real estate professional and lender. But we're happy to help as well. We're happy to talk through some of this stuff. Again, I want to stress I am not necessarily a real estate professional, but as it extends to the impact to your financial plan and long-term goals, just know that the way that you buy your house is much more complex than just how much can I afford per month. Really ask questions, really be thoughtful, think about the impact today and the impact tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. I'm happy to help with any questions. Feel free to reach out with us with anything you got.